Buddha's encounter with the angry businessman teaches a profound lesson about patience, transformation, and true forgiveness. The businessman, frustrated that his children spent time meditating instead of working, confronted Buddha in anger. Overcome with emotions, he spat on Buddha's face, expecting a reaction. However, Buddha simply smiled, showing no anger or resentment. The businessman, unsettled by this response, left but could not stop thinking about Buddha's calmness. That night, he was deeply disturbed, realizing the weight of his actions. The next day, he returned, full of regret, and begged for forgiveness. Surprisingly, Buddha told him there was nothing to forgive. As the person who had committed the offense no longer existed, he had transformed overnight. This story highlights that true forgiveness is not about holding on to past mistakes, but allowing someone to grow beyond them. It teaches us that guilt itself is punishment enough and that real forgiveness brings peace. The story of Buddha and the angry businessman reveals the power of inner peace and genuine forgiveness. The businessman, frustrated by his children's devotion to Buddha, approached him in anger and spat on his face. Expecting retaliation, he was instead met with a calm smile, leaving him confused and unsettled. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about Buddha's reaction, feeling deep regret. The next day, he returned to apologize, but Buddha surprised him by saying there was nothing to forgive. He explained that the person who had acted in anger was no longer the same person standing before him now. This profound lesson teaches us that true forgiveness is not about reminding someone of their mistakes but about allowing them to grow. Holding on to resentment only creates suffering, while letting go brings peace. The story reminds us to approach life with understanding, patience, and the ability to see beyond momentary actions. Buddha's encounter with the angry businessman teaches a deep lesson about self-control, transformation, and true forgiveness. When the businessman, furious that his children spent time with Buddha instead of working, approached him, he let his anger take over and spat on Buddha's face. Instead of reacting with rage, Buddha simply smiled, leaving the man shocked and confused, unable to forget the incident. The businessman spent a restless night in regret. The next day, he returned to apologize. However, Buddha responded that there was nothing to forgive because the person who acted in anger was no longer the same as the one standing before him. This wisdom highlights that people change with time and realization. True forgiveness does not hold grudges or make others feel guilty, it allows growth. The story reminds us that responding with patience and wisdom rather than emotion can transform conflicts into powerful lessons of understanding and peace. Buddha's response to the angry businessman teaches a valuable lesson about self-awareness and true forgiveness. When the businessman, furious at Buddha's influence on his children, spat on his face, Buddha simply smiled, showing no anger. This unexpected reaction deeply unsettled the man, who spent a sleepless night reflecting on his actions. The next day, filled with regret, he returned to apologize. However, Buddha told him there was nothing to forgive, as the person who had acted out of anger no longer existed. This response highlights that people evolve, and holding on to past mistakes only hinders growth. True forgiveness is about letting go, not reminding others of their faults. The story teaches us to remain calm in the face of negativity and to practice forgiveness in a way that allows healing and transformation for both parties. True forgiveness, as taught by Buddha, is not about making someone feel guilty but about understanding that people change. When the furious businessman spat on Buddha, expecting anger, he was met with only a calm smile. This unexpected reaction shook him, leading to deep self-reflection. The next day, filled with regret, he returned to apologize. However, Buddha explained that the man who had acted in anger no longer existed, so there was no need for forgiveness. This profound lesson teaches that we should not hold on to past mistakes, whether our own or others. True forgiveness is letting go of resentment without making someone feel indebted for their wrongdoing. It encourages inner peace and self-growth. Instead of reacting with anger, we should strive for understanding and compassion. This story reminds us that by practicing genuine forgiveness, we free both ourselves and others from unnecessary guilt and suffering.